In this speech, we are going to detail a hypothetical example of a gun and bullet, metal and explosive shortage depriving a year of world warring most of its 1 million body count. You do realize that shrinking war's supply is the precise peace secret under our very elevated noses these inexcusable last 10 millennia, don't you? Vast numbers of sectarian, subnational, civil revolt and warlord battles, ever raging in the Mideast, exactly illustrate the unrestrained manufacture of weapons as physical cause. Clamp down on that, locally to internationally, and we're back to titanic escalation of kitchen knife, club, and hammer wars, right? Not to mention a rash of headbutting. While large, aggressive international invaders think superpowers, always nuclear and conventional megathreats, love to enrich their politicians with bribery and their weaponeers with tax theft, the key to the kingdom is laissez-faire or unlimited growth of arms companies and arsenals. Thus well supplied, mega-militaries and their impetus to attack are a political and fiscal fait accompli. Nasty subnational bullies, with or without bribery and tax theft, still manage to raise funds at the points of all of those guns, with ideological or sectarian appeals and certain legal or illegal businesses, and then buy zillions of assault weapons and also heavier war material. Next, capturing weaker army supplies of, say, American weapons. Many TV expert opinion makers, fresh from careers promoting government and self-interests, rabble-rouse the public to rush ever more soldiers, bombs, and bullets to our latest client, juntas, who invariably get their asses kicked, even worse, the more help we give them. When a couple of Americans are publicly slaughtered, a brutal aggressor grabs big chunks of land, and our corrupt, bigoted client government further weakens, everybody agrees with the Washington profiteers that another couple of decades and trillions of dollars and thousands more dead Americans are all just what the doctor ordered, including piling the entire region with more weapons to the moon. Eventually, we'll all be sick, sad, exhausted, and even more broke, and we'll scram, leaving behind weapons enough for our sworn enemies to slaughter multitudes, all while they recruit new enemies of the great Satan from 50 countries and press ahead with the coming era of weapons of mass destruction, American city terrorism, and stock up on oils and perfumes to welcome their 80 virgins when planetary paranoia, depression, and nuclear war ends the world. Long as you keep asking for it or settling for it, you're gonna get it. But before you throw up your hands and wait for the inevitable, come back to the present and past when our leerless feeders pulley pulpit. Fearless leaders bully pulpit always sets our agenda. He describes the evil brutality of our latest nemesis and demands and promises another twilight struggle for righteousness, world peace, and your national security. At risk of being confused for John Lennon, I ask you again to imagine what the first president who ain't a pawn of the killing business would say. My fellow Americans, look forward to another year of fear and frustration as bad guys rampage over world hotspots. Yet I will resign this office before I or Congress and you, the American people, require me to fire one more bullet into such vicious heartbreak or send a single weapon to any combatant. All your lives you were told that every war was caused by that other evil guy, and more of our good soldiers and weapons are always the glorious road to peace everlasting. Take 5 seconds of silence, please, while we review history. Now you understand. They lied. They didn't tell you the killing was just for money because you would have jailed them instead of elected them. Let's discuss a typical war, but add a hypothetical difference to teach ourselves. Fighters easily buy 100,000 guns, 200 tanks, and 500 artillery pieces from the worldwide weapons industry. Most CEOs tell me, our business is booming. In 6 months, 25,000 die, 100,000 are maimed, and 200,000 are driven from their homes. The next 6 months, the carnage declines only slightly as they break 10% of their weapons and run a tad short on ammo. But just when the big orders are sent out for replacement guns and tons more bombs, missiles, mortar shells, bullets, extraordinary steel and explosive shortages worldwide slow the weaponeers' assembly lines 90%. This crisis lasts another year, during which all combatants' fighting power declines sharply, continuously, and increasingly. Our example war, though, is only one of the typical worldwide 20 that last year killed over 1 million people, maimed 4 million, and drove 12 million from their homes into squalid, plague-ridden refugee camps. So even with some major slaughter capacity lasting through that year of shortages, the world's annual 1 million war death total drops to 400,000. 2.4 million fewer are maimed, and 5 million stay on in their own homes. God forbid if the weapon and ammo famine lasted another year, why, fewer than 1 in 20 soldiers could even reload. Fortunately, the powers that be answer the bell of this intolerable crisis 100 times faster than their AIDS, famine, and Ebola apathy. Ramp up new metal and gunpowder sources, and every arms amalgamated jacks production up to 130%. Now, renewing the annual ruination of hundreds of millions of people, billions if we count destroyed war economies, is of course a problem for those poor saps. But the important thing is we've restored the riches of the creme de la creme, the fat, happy profiteers of the ruling elite. How we kill and how we stop it is not only the moral of my story, his story, but the fact. War is weapons. Peace is not. Disarmament. I will now discuss our attack. attack upon war's supply. I will listen to every argument that I will endanger so many as 1% of the number we save. But I will dismiss any ideas of trading other people's tragedy for pride, power, or money, honey. Weaponeers bribe leaders for your taxes to buy weapons. I am talking, as are your founders, your God, to every president, legislator, soldier, and judge, and citizen, and mother, and father, and child on earth. Outlaw all money paid to leaders besides our salaries. Provide candidates and incumbents equal publicity resources so the corrupted can't buy extra vote-stealing propaganda. As constitutionally required equality obviously requires. I submit to all signatories of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty my admission that America has for 50 years abrogated its main tenet that we work for total weapons of mass destruction disarmament and encourage each nation to ask itself, what have we ever done for the cause of preventing doomsday besides lie when we signed that treaty? I'm beginning negotiations today with every nation on earth who will answer the phone to put every weapon and ammunition production line on earth on an increasing permanent crash diet. But don't get your panties in a wad. We can still waste another 5 or 6 million with the leftovers. Closely related is a new conventional weapon destroying treaty that also enormously strengthens the nuclear one by slashing missile population down to minimum satellite needs and makes attack aircraft so sparse that you'll need to charter a Boeing 737 to drop bombs on folks. And since tanks and artillery are always for attacking other folks' land or countries, those invasion monsters will vanish by law as world militaries retool down to the 20th of manpower and trillionth of explosive flying force required for modest mutual border defenses. Now remember, not one of 1,000 whiners you'll hear is afraid of anything but losing stock in his killing business. And for the next 100 years, any nation that refuses, with the majority, to cut its deadly force each and every year won't do a lick of business with the rest of us. Our current nuclear disarmament treaty neglected to instruct how, in necessary detail, nations can travel this challenging road. I'll negotiate to strengthen it. Nuclear power forces capacity and temptation to make bombs. Either both or neither will be ended. Beyond minimum radioactive atom enrichment for cancer therapy, phased out as genetic and immune system therapies supplant uranium mining and uranium mining and processing must be ended as soon as possible. Any bright child can structure nuclear disarmament. America, Russia, China, India, Pakistan, England, France, and Israel steadily slash to 50 missiles with single warheads apiece. Then every 100 days destroy one more. On world television, of course. All other nations with power plants, plutonium stocks, and bomb-capable industries come under the world's microscope and negotiation to disable, dismantle, and destroy all nuclear industry. Once that smart, moral 10-year-old reviews the history of nations ignoring their nuclear disarmament treaty, since signing in favor of building all war from 50 caliber to 50 megatons to reward weapons companies with our trillions after they bribed our leaders with their billions, and the young'un hears about my additional anti-corruption laws to become another world treaty enforced by each nation's federal courts, directing us to obey every constitution that orders people's equality and safety to be protected, the kid would say, since corruption causes war, laws to stop bribery should move failed disarmament efforts to success, right? So get cracking, Mr. President. I got your back. Did you say nations generally borrow money to start wars? And you designed your treaties to be delightfully enriching and empowering for nations to join in? And you promise nasty stuff like embargoes to holdouts? Then make each applicant balance their budget by law. Now, besides no bribes for gross armies and weapons, there isn't any more war money extra in the treasuries anyway. Yeah? Let's ask our 10-year-old another question or two. Do international wars happen by sending soldiers across borders? Except when you fire missiles? Yes. Do those wars get worse when you sell or give away weapons or carry them across borders? Of course. Did you know that most folks believe that each of those evil, horrible causes of war is legal? Really? Then shouldn't your treaty forbid each one? Asked the precious poppet. Of doing those war supply things? Not so tough after you kick weaponeers out of government, right? I don't mean to suggest that world evolution down to border defenses must immediately require 200 nations to each manufacture its own guns. Just that over 99% of the international weapons trade fuels 99% of the world's wars. So, for other than proven self-defense needs of nations working diligently to befriend and pacify neighbors, weapons companies and governments should, by law, minimally supply their own nations and no one else. Such law meshes perfectly with the drastic production cuts imposed on every merchant of death outside of the dwindling holdout countries we have the carrots and sticks to bring on board sooner or later. Only this essential package of national and international law defines real national security. All his stories' claims of achieving defense through arms races and mega armies are, of course, lies as giant as the thousands of wars, slaughtering nearly 500 million souls through man-unkind's savage uncivilization. Our treaty, then, will require each signatory to clamp down more every year their weapons production, sales, and transnational export, to evaporate the gasoline before pouring into the tanks of every war machine in the world, stifling the savagery of every violent sect, warlord, urban gang, civil war, and international invasion. So how has other peace theory, strategy, politics, and diplomacy worked for 10,000 years? Not! About time to talk hard law, nuts and bolts, don't you think? Since you were a small child, your government has told you, "We'll achieve peace, safety, and security through huge preparations for war." And then, oops, here comes another war. Good thing, 'cause we're ready. You're told, guns don't kill people, people kill people. Have you ever thought, yes, but those guns work so well and so often, just as designed. Peace through strength. Did 10 millennia of strength get us peace, or 500 million murdered? Is the jury about in with a verdict on the more killing machines for less death proposal? Or shall we stay with our favorite patriotic government slogans? War is peace. Peace is war. Weapons are safety. Disarmament is danger. Is it possible that we hear these incredible martial theories always and only from a select elite overwhelmed by need for money, hatred, pride, and power? Do you recall that these shocking contradictions? War is peace, peace is war, weapons are safety, and disarmament is danger, are invariably accompanied by give me money, give me weapons, march to war, and remember just the glory, forget the dying's cries, never tell the story of our slogan's evil lies. Thank you, and God bless the United States of America. As soon as we start caring for ourselves and our world friends, that is. A number of my speeches decry the horror of conquerors invading thousands of miles beyond their central empire's origin. I recalled the story of General Billy Mitchell, who conceived of long-range, air-delivered explosives, making both massed infantry and border defenses obsolete. Modern governments then rushed to deploy competitive invasion forces, falsely assuring their populations that our great offense is a fine defense because we can stay their hand by threatening to destroy their homeland also. Concerning the genocidal certainty of nuclear war, this mutual assured destruction standoff has worked for a couple of generations and major pairs of opponents. But my speeches review the terrible and increasing risk of doomsday when paranoia, accident, insanity, and proliferation or escalating desperation and hatred incinerate one or more hair-trigger fuses. Conventionally, all this high-tech, high-speed, high-powered sky warring has produced history's greatest slaughter since the combined two world wars. Now, every despot cleanses his nation of ethnic resistors or sectarian resistors with bombs and machine guns from his omnipresent air force. Most international military competition seeks first strike capacity, and aggressors often feel rewarded early in new wars by battering opponents' armies and civilians while only losing the odd bomber pilot. The only defense beyond overmatched air defenses is to massively grow your own armies, tanks, air troop transports, artillery, and missiles to threaten devastating counterattack. But your only real regional ace in the hole is nuclear weapons to terrify whole continents with. Keep this up, and safe standoffs will be universally perfect, right? Wrong. Finally, when every square mile is wired to explode, just light a match. Which explains the million scorched ice balls, right? So what is the real motive and objective of the modern high-tech national security manager? Certainly not national security, which anyone knows is only achieved when your borders are appropriately defended and you either follow or create an international legacy of friendship with nations that, with you, have renounced decades of preparation to waste other nations far and wide. Conversely, leading world competition, racing for vast excesses of mobile, blitzkrieg, tank, and airborne infantry, and thousands of jet and rocket-powered explosives, inviting all to aim same at every soldier, building, and civilian in your nation, makes your people and everybody else safe and secure, just like screwing for chastity, if you'll pardon my French. No, superpowerdom is out of control hunting instinct, emotional insanity, combined with titanic ego grandiosity and cold trillions thieving greed and ambition. Millions of pros work this scam full-time, especially raising the propaganda cash to sell this sick savagery to high-tech populations with 5-second attention spans, with pithy little patriotic lies claiming every attacking war is the only safe alternative. All leaders know they destroy everyone's national security with the explosive invasion warfare system. Their entire careers are designed to serve their own private, not our public interests, always selling us, cronies, weapons, and also usually a range of other corporate services, profit magnified by treasury contracts and tax and regulation breaks. They do it all for bribes. I mean, campaign contributions. In my last speech, I'll tell you about a single American legislator who brags about pulling in $640 million. Trillion-dollar bank and broker bailouts for million-dollar bribes aside, I'm most burned up about murder for money. Companies pay men, and not a few women, to go to Washington and write tax contracts to build, buy, deploy, explode in war, and replace and reload weapons of mass soldier and civilian murder, deliberately killing our young people and economy merely to grossly enrich the parasite politicians and merchants of death. Millions of national security analysts are paid to juggle all this indefensible destruction to retain offensive initiative of their client leaders. The few anti-war thinkers, paid by no one, invariably focus on hopeful, spiritual inspiration bound to humanize the monsters someday. Pretty please. Even in the 100 books I've read recounting the sick history of high-tech corrupt invasion warfare, not to be found is one single clear ethical, practical, technological, legal, negotiable, popularly feasible plan to achieve secure national defenses, so obviously dependent on overthrow and retirement of the flying bomb distant attack military system, apparently too standard to even imagine challenging, much less condemning and banning. My speeches have covered much of this new ground already, though with its historic and elementary logic, I don't understand why everyone who ain't on the take hasn't always agreed with me and then raised some serious hell. I'll mention an ideal scheme between nations that gives each's defense such a giant advantage that even several neighbors at once wouldn't dare invade. With umpteen-mile flying bombs outlawed, nations are only permitted small infantry along their borders in equivalent numbers to repel similar sentries of neighbors. Until somebody secretly upgrades their rifles and sniper skills for 2,000-yard kill shots, this ends international war. And also men with despot ambitions find other careers because they aren't allowed excess police state forces to overwhelm and slaughter democratic resistors. So much for most, if not all, civil war. By the way, if you can offer a shred of evidence that my theory, war is weapons, is wrong, stick it on our How to Save the World YouTube collection, and I will withdraw my every speech and await your better ideas. Even with slightly superior guns and marksmen, any attempt to invade without tanks and bombers or gross superiority in infantry would subject the aggressor to exactly what a few farmers did to a large British army marching from Concord to Lexington. Shot 'em to pieces from behind every tree, rock, and barn. Helpless invading offenses, invulnerable homeland defenses. I'll admit my scheme is law, treaty, and negotiation intensive, and the polar opposite of 10,000 years of offenses overwhelming defenses. But then his story's theme is how to destroy the world, and you and I have decided instead how to save the world. Be awful tough to fire weapons that we no longer make and sell. Conversely, militant his story proves every year that we'll never silence great batches we hand out to everybody, eh? Same two reasons you take scissors away from rambunctious kids. Turns out adults with hunting instinct, money, and ambition get in enough trouble without machine guns and rockets. Remember that, folks, and we'll survive and civilize. My endorsed by sociologists story of certain human weakness crossing a specific line of technology to deliberate mass murder, solved not by morality, but specific restraint of opportunity or technological supply, reminds me to break it down for clarity. 10,000 hatchets and spears in 8,000 BC did not produce war until men discovered land and grain, and game and berries dried up one year. Then a sudden desperate crisis led cavemen to gather every single weapon they had and use them at once because killing an entire village seemed to be the only alternative to starvation. Likewise, in my perfect world of border defenses only, peace would reign only so long as one nation was not dying of starvation and thirst. Then they would find a way, even with the same 1,000 carbines as their prosperous neighbor with plenty of food and water, to rampage over and murder 1 million in desperation. Analyze modern causes of warfare in addition to the corrupt weapons business I focus on, and desperate, organized criminal enterprises of groups doing anything in a rotten economy with food and water shortages to either survive or believe wrongly that they must steal and kill to survive are the other major causes of war. Fortunately, the entire Swords into Plowshares international and national programs under our discussion would continue removing all major causes of war, even the overburdened planet collection of horrors, each with long-term solutions found by a world spending 3%, not 30%, on weapons. Once that desperate starvation versus new grain technology situation made the cavemen gather every weapon for attack, the new village dictators made sure to hoard many extra and improved weapons and train a relatively large dominant army for every power government for the next 10,000 years. Immediately the war strategy became work fanatically hard on technology that enables each government soldier to kill several of the enemy. Shields, catapults, horses, whatever it took to keep winning the arms and strategy race to mass murder. Battering rams to breach castle doors, gunpowder and cannons, machine guns, missiles, bombers, and nuclear weapons. How can our army kill more, farther and wider until we rule the world? Offense, invade, conquer. I revealed the universal human techno-insanity when my first thought after designing the utopian world of border sentries only was, secretly replace your rifles with 50 caliber 2,000 yard sniper cannons. Take out your neighbor's entire guard force without losing a man, and you're off to the races. And I call other people sick. Here's my point. War has two critical causes. One, one's belief that either survival or satisfaction of dominance is achieved by organizing with allies to commit mass murder. And two, availability of excess weapons of mass murder. Notice that Swords into Plowshares eases the vast majority of those two causes. Let's look once more at the border guard scenario that tempted me to immediately set about designing the next arms race and cruel world. You can bet that final negotiations to finalize the destruction of every weapon, bomber, bomb, missile, tank, etc., all clearly designed for invasion's mass murder and tyrannical conquest, would then focus on how those border guards are to be armed. Certain nations would hold out for machine guns that can fire hundreds of bullets a minute, backed up by ammo stocks for months of incessant use. Other nations will point out that border defense that is not backed up by vast hordes of equally armed infantry throughout your nation, ready to surge outward to reinforce a border force and convert from defense to invasion, only needs enough speed, force, range, and supply of gunfire to knock out maximum aggression from an equivalently lightly armed neighbor border force only. Therefore, small clip semi-automatic rifles with ammo resupply for only ample defense against that cross-border force must be the maximum permitted military power. To counter negotiators holding out for each man armed to get the jump on 50 opponents with heavy bullet resupply, just ask, you wouldn't be thinking of offing their sentry force one moonless night, then hopping in pickups and flying for their nation's capital, would you? And with minimal force, we all intend only defense, and we all are incapable of invasion offense. That is the only way, the only design for peace that keeps us all safe, and you know it. War is more and more weapons. Peace is less and less weapons. To equip soldiers for invasion and mass murder is the intention, plan, capacity, and ever so regularly the physical reality of the crime against humanity of attacking war by attacking armies, big attacking armies, and missiles. The farther we get with our disarmament movement, the more many people will say, no, I won't do it. I'm sure my enemy won't disarm, so the minute I do, he'll shoot me. I prefer to add weapons. I prefer to add weapons to either keep him scared or maybe waste him and win, since I plan a benevolent empire to forestall his evil tyranny. We need to reply, your way has wrecked 10,000 years and billions of lives, and nobody's asking you to reduce to more than 1% less than your opponent. And unless he publicly destroys that same 1% tomorrow, you just keep sitting on your present arsenal. Your way starts the next 100 wars and brings us closer to doomsday every day. Our way makes every war and doomsday farther away every day. Peace is such our overwhelming need and natural biological condition that even you and all your big army hucksters are always shouting that you're winning our peace. Problem is, you're lying. You're really killing for money and making war, not peace. The weapons you build, money you make, and genocide you commit have proven this each of those 10,000 years. If you refuse to help us, and many of you will, we are going to drag your butts into court and make you. In that sense, peace is war. Legal war. Ignoring that tough truth is my definition of a peace wimp. I think we're clear by now that all heavy weaponry is purely evil, utterly unrelated to any scheme of defense that is not mad or mutual assured destruction. Even that concept claiming secure deterrence is a deliberate lie, because every mega arsenal builder in history has ended up using that population and earth-scorching capacity exactly as designed for invasions, not just armed standoffs. Naturally, a weapon hater like me would like to live in a world without guns. But I defer to anyone who can provide examples of folks truly saving lives with guns. Lots of crooks, now and 50 years from now, will have guns. Knives or just really mean fists. Privately armed citizens have held off millions of violent criminals with their own guns. On the other hand, weapons in your home are 10 times more likely to be used against your own family, usually by your own family. Cops need guns to keep the peace in heavily armed countries, which still have murder rates higher than war deaths. And in our case, now moving higher than automobile deaths. Unarmed cops in lightly armed countries preside over tiny murder rates. You'll find that those lightly armed nations also virtually never raise big armies and invade others. While I do not advocate prying your cold, dead fingers off of your gun, unrestrained manufacture of more of our own shooting irons than total population by the only nation in history to also weaponize 200 wars we never even personally fought in is clearly technology and philosophy gone mad. Gee, I hope you're not close to bedtime. I don't want you going to bed mad.